So almost about 10 years ago, I lived in Seattle, Washington right after college. And I remember around that time, I was working this labor job and fucking hated it. I ended up getting fired. I ended up going to this bookstore called Left Bank Books, and I started reading about anarchism and kind of being like, oh, this is interesting. This is an interesting idea. This is an interesting topic. And also around that time, I ended up connecting with Black folks in the city that were organizers. And I remember one of them said, oh, me and some of my friends are having a book club this weekend. Like, do you want to come? You should come and hang out, we can talk about like Black radical literature. And I was like, oh, bet, like, say less. Showed up. We ended up at this cafe talking. And after about an hour of talking there, everyone there was like, all right, are we ready to do it? And I was like, do what? And we ended up going out painting to acknowledge a recent shooting that happened of a Somalian pregnant woman, and community gun violence ended up leading to a stray bullet, almost ending her life and ending her pregnancy. And I remember in that moment going out, having never gone painting before, and realizing like, oh, this is a level of risk that I'm taking up with these new people. And this is something that I haven't done before, but it's something that I'm excited about. And it's something that I want to kind of learn from. That was a really transformative moment in my radicalization process, because I didn't need to read theory to understand that what we were doing was justified. I didn't need to like have total trust in the people that I was working with. And I needed to read and understand my own willingness to break a few simple rules in order to do what was right in a situation where something horrible had happened to someone in the community. Looking back at this moment, I now understand how revolution and liberation and social change doesn't just happen in moments of crisis or moments of protest or moments of spectacle. It can happen in quiet moments at home. It can happen at your job. It can happen with your friends. It can happen with someone you've met at a party or a concert. It can be simple moments that push you to do more in terms of resisting a state, a law, a rule that doesn't actually like help society become better. It actually becomes a sort of deterrence for us in living more authentically and doing things in a way that either is civil disobedience, which is disobeying unjust laws, or practicing civil initiative, which is doing various forms of mutual aid and direct action that fill in the gaps of what the state refuses to do, that intrinsically leads to the exploitation or violence of certain populations of people. This is why I wanted to do this video on anarchist calisthenics.
Wait, hey, yo, wait. You're not going fast enough. Yo, wait, hey.
Theory that I recently learned about that I think is really important, especially in this political moment now where we are in a second Trump administration. We're seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion be peeled back. We're seeing very overt attacks on trans life, both in the government and the military. We're seeing a peeling back of reproductive health education in schools. We're seeing federal funding being paused that is necessary to help vulnerable populations of people. We're seeing entire populations of immigrants being categorized as criminal, being categorized as essentially subhuman by a government that has a cabinet that is worth over $300 billion of white people that are white supremacists, that are a part of the elite, that believe in eugenics, that literally probably want to end our right to privacy as we know it. And how in these moments of terror and spectacle and crisis, it's important to practice a kind of liberatedness that allows us to take small steps towards the larger steps that will eventually be required of us if we want to resist state violence and resist fascism. And if the state is fascist, we have to be prepared to understand what we're up against, but we also have to be prepared to understand the many ways that we can begin to free ourselves now, which is why I want to do this episode about anarchist calisthenics and talk about a few questions that kind of help me dig into this idea. And maybe it's a framework that can be really useful for you in looking at your life, your community, and the people around you, and how you can kind of help nudge people to do a bit more, and how it can help you nudge people to do a bit more and help you build trust in community before these more dire moments come. So let's dig into it. What this moment requires is that we don't become overwhelmed by the state or the violence or the repression that it can bring to us in our communities. So first, we should define what anarchist calisthenics is. And this is a terminology that comes from James C. Scott and it comes from a text called Two Cheers for Anarchism. And I'm going to read kind of a summation of this text and talk to you about specifically what anarchist calisthenics is. Anarchist calisthenics is a concept that emerges from James C. Scott's experience, Nuremberg. Somebody tell me how to say that. Nuremberg, where they observed pedestrians conforming to an irrational traffic light system, despite having no traffic to wait for. The social norm of obedience sparked the idea of anarchist calisthenics as a form of mental and moral preparation for acts of resistance. It involves deliberately breaking minor rules, like jaywalking, to challenge ingrained habits of compliance and to cultivate the courage to defy unjust system. The core of anarchist calisthenics lies in the practice of questioning laws, even the seemingly trivial ones, and using personal judgment to assess whether they are just or reasonable. By regularly engaging in small acts of rebellion, individuals can stay in shape for larger acts of resistance, fostering the mental resilience needed to confront more significant injustices. The idea is that there are small, everyday acts of defiance that build a foundation for the kinds of bravery required when large, more consequential acts of disobedience are needed to resist oppressive systems. I learned about this term like a few weeks ago, and I remember, I think around 2018, I think someone explained it to me and I really liked it then, but it didn't really stick. But looking at my radicalization journey, I can see anarchist calisthenics throughout. I think of when I was in college and Michael Brown was killed and a bunch of Black students gathered and we ended up marching to the student center and occupying it. And that became like a big news story on our campus. And it began this whole campaign around confronting racism and racial inequity on campus and demanding cultural competency. When I have been at a protest and a regular march descends into chaos when the state inevitably overreacts and tries to target certain individuals in the crowd, and how these smaller moments in my past that taught me to resist these other rules or unjust laws eventually led me to understand the rationale of resisting in moments of crisis, in moments of spectacle, in moments of state repression. And how building up towards that is so necessary. And it doesn't just happen overnight. Sometimes it can, but it doesn't always happen overnight. How does anarchist calisthenics show up in our lives? How can it show up? If you look at poor people's history, Black people's history, people of color's history, brown people, indigenous people, you could see anarchist calisthenics throughout our entire history since we have come into contact with whiteness and white supremacy. How the Underground Railroad and how slave rebellions, those were major acts of rebellion that could have only been possible, keeping certain mold of their culture that the slave master or white supremacists attempted to erase when they kidnapped Africans and brought them to this country. The small acts of, I think about enslaved Blacks, enslaved Africans learning to read and write, us fighting to stay in contact with our children if they were on another property or plantation. Poor people find ways to share resources that is delegated by the state, and they end up reappropriating them in their communities. People sharing EBT, people cooking meals together, people communalizing childcare, doing things that not only go against the rules, but provide systems of us taking care of each other, not paying for public transit. There's a whole movement in New York City where folks are evading fares, where people share videos and links and photos of the various subway stops where the cops are there and are actively trying to stop people from evading fare. And how even the notion of people having to pay to get around their city, even the notion of redlining and gentrification being also tied to how city planning makes sure that public transit is available in certain areas and not others. People acquiring free groceries, whether that be through dumpster diving or sharing EBT or other means. A few years ago, where me and my friends were acquiring American flags and having, let's just say we were having nighttime fires where we were hanging out with these American flags. Us making that into a game and figuring out which of us could get the most American flags, and oh my gosh, you got that many, oh my gosh. How turning an act of resistance into a sort of game made the idea of resisting these symbols of patriotism more possible. For a number of years, I had a denim jacket where I literally wrote, "Fuck white America" on the back. I would go out and that would be a way for me to test public space and to make people uncomfortable and to say something that was deeply rooted in my ideas about white supremacy, about white hegemony, about colonization, and how these acts of resistance were important. All of these other things, led to me understanding anti-fascism, led to me understanding rape culture, led to me understanding what it means to be at a party and to know that, hey, that dude over there groped that person in the other room. Let's go and fucking confront them and get them out of this party. Being able to do that at various points in my 20s and to do it on a dime, how that was one, various years of mental preparation and understanding how I wanted to show up when patriarchy or sexual violence or various forms of violence showed up in community spaces that I was in, but also having had various moments of confrontation and practice and breaking these minor laws or social expectations or norms and understanding a situation that was unreasonable to me, but might seem reasonable to other people. If something is unjust, we have a right to resist. I really want to center people in the fact that the point of anarchist calisthenics isn't to like manipulate other people into acts of resistance or trying to test people or vet them. Like, I think sometimes anarchist calisthenics can be appropriate in situations of vetting where you're looking towards more dramatic and militant forms of political action together. But really, it's about understanding that moments of liberation and revolution aren't just in the large, huge, public spectacle moments of protest, but they can be in quiet moments where you're with your friends and you call someone out, where you are walking around your neighborhood and you see a cop harassing someone and you sit there and do a cop watch, or you end up intervening in a way that de-escalates the situation. It's about understanding that we can have tiny moments of revolution and liberation that can lead to larger and more powerful and more authentic ways of resisting down the line, and how small acts of resistance can be just as powerful as the larger acts of resistance that eventually get us revolutionary wins and gains in the movement towards defeating capitalism and fascism and white supremacy and beyond. I want to remind us that where I think anarchist calisthenics can be really useful is that it's about understanding that building trust together doesn't just need to happen in moments of crisis. It's that we can build trust with each other through activities that have lesser risk, train us in critical thinking, that train us in resisting certain rules around us, and can help us understand that a state or an institution saying that something is wrong does not necessarily mean that it's wrong, that we deserve to use our individual judgment and our own mind, and we deserve to exercise our autonomy. Because so much of the state and white supremacy is about tricking us into systems and modes of behavior that help us forget our autonomy and help us hand it over to states and institutions. And so I really, really just wanted to do this quick episode because I think in this moment that we're in, there's so much fear, there's so much overwhelm, there's so much doomerism. If you haven't checked out Lucretia McEvil's YouTube channel, or they recently did a video about revolutionary optimism, and I really loved it. One thing that I kept thinking about throughout that video is that it's these small acts of resistance that can help people that are newer to ideas or processes or movements of liberation and understand that you don't just need to show up to a protest and join the Black Bloc. You can look at your community and the spaces that you show up and think of ways that you want to react when things go wrong, when unjust things happen, when certain rules are instituted that simply aren't for the well-being of the community or the individual, and how we can resist one step at a time, and how that is so, so important. Thank you for watching this video. Comment and let me know if you've heard of anarchist calisthenics before. I'll put a link to the book that was mentioned in the description. And I really, really encourage people during this moment in time to take care of each other, to show up for each other, to check in with each other, and to find simple ways to resist the state violence that we are seeing now and that will continue in the future. And if you want to support this channel, like, comment, and subscribe. Consider joining my Patreon, where if you join for free, you get access to a newsletter of monthly direct action resources, or if you become a paid member, you get early access to videos like this, and you get to answer polls about other content and things you want to see on this channel. And if you want to support this podcast, consider following us on Patreon, where you can get a free monthly newsletter if you sign up as a free member, where we'll give out monthly resources, readings, movement updates that might be useful for folks that just want to be in the loop and that just want to kind of have something dropped into their inbox that's gonna kind of give you some liberatory or revolutionary spirit. Or if you become a paid member, you get early access to this podcast and you get early access to educational modules that we'll be doing down the line this year, and early access to the content that's going to be on our Dugout website, our Dugout Revolutionary School. So thank you for watching. Enjoy this Black History Month and get out there. As my co-host would say, stay safe, stay dangerous.